And one. And we're live one more time. Welcome to Dojo Live, one more edition of Season 4, broadcasting live from our still beautiful Mexico City offices at Nearsoft. And today, joining me today in Dojo Live are Elizabeth Cain, or Liz Cain. She's the Vice President of GoToMarket at OpenView. So welcome, Liz. Welcome to today's broadcast.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure, Liz. And also, of course, as ever, we have Luis Ortiz right there in our Hermosillo offices. Hi, Luis. Thank you for being here as well. Such a short notice. We appreciate it. Okay. All right. So today's interview is going to be about the role of sales in a product-led growth company. Is that right, Liz?
That's right.
Perfect. Okay, cool. But before we jump into that, Liz, I'd like to start today's conversation just asking you about you. Tell us who you are and what you do at OpenView and what is OpenView for our viewers, please. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, let's start with OpenView. So OpenView is a venture capital firm. We invest exclusively in expansion stage software companies. And so what that means to us is B2B software companies that have found product market fit and are really starting to scale. So often we're investing around the B round, maybe 50% B, 25A, 25C. And because we have this very tight niche in how we invest, we've been able to build an expansion team that actually goes in and works with the portfolio of companies post-investment to help them scale. And what we've found is that companies that are at this stage of growth tend to have very common challenges. So over the last 11 years that the firm has been operating, the ones that have stood out are really around acquiring and retaining the right customers and talent. So making sure that you're finding more of the right people and more of the right customers. And I say right because I think early on in a company, you probably find a couple of customers that maybe don't evolve with you. Your target market changes a bit. So making sure that you're actually narrowing in on the right group. And so we've built a team that I lead, the expansion platform, that actually goes in and works with those companies across a couple of different functions. The first is GoToMarket. That's a team that works primarily with heads of sales, marketing, founders, and product. It can be pretty data oriented. So think competitive intelligence, customer segmentation, pricing and packaging strategy, sales enablement, and then we also work on actually implementing that. I also run a team that does talent acquisition and our internal marketing group. So it's sort of a broad role working across a whole bunch of different companies.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Liz. Thank you for that. And so that's about overview. And would you mind telling us a little bit about you, how you pretty much ended up with overview and how it all came about to be?
Yeah, I'd like to know a little bit about what was the road like for you to get there.
Yeah, I'll give you like the 30,000-foot view. I was working for a small startup called Open Air out of Boston, and we got acquired by NetSuite. You've probably heard of NetSuite, large ERP company, public in 2007, got acquired by Oracle last year. I was with them for about 8 years and worked in a couple of different functions in sales operations, then in account management, working on like the retention and upsell side of the business with the install base. And then moved into running their lead gen program. And so in 2012, we hired our first group of BDRs, which was the team doing both inbound lead qualification and outbound prospecting. And we built the funnel for NetSuite sales org in really two ways. One was about the lead pipeline and the other was talent. And so we tried to create a team that was the bench for the sales organization and tried to fill our mid-market, not enterprise sales roles with promotions from that org. So that's what I was doing pre-OpenView. And I grew that team to just about 170 people when I left. We had hired close to 400 people in about 3.5 years. And I wanted to go smaller again. And so finding OpenView was an awesome way to work across a number of companies. And rather than just going to one, it was a pretty cool opportunity.
Yeah. And I also wanted to know what's it like for you. This is the last comment that you made. You came from being in one company and now in a capital firm in a VC firm, now you work with a lot of companies. What's the difference in that?
Oh, there's a lot of differences. I mean, the first 6 months was like a very hard adjustment. I went from being in the driver's seat where I could make decisions, make changes, like pretty much on the fly, right? To being in this consultative role where, you know, we're having conversations, we're providing advice and best practices and benchmarks, but startups move quick and not always in a linear fashion. And so, you know, I moved into this sort of influencer role, and it took time to adjust to that and to make sure that I was providing really sound advice that somebody could act on and that they could implement, because there are things I think that I would see or want to do that a really small company is not ready for. So making sure I was kind of like meeting them where they are made a big difference.
Right. Cool. And then one last question about your background.
Yeah.
What was your education?
Education?
College? Yeah. You went to college or not?
Middlebury, Vermont, Middlebury College. I did an economics degree for my undergrad.
Right.
You know, I think if I like reflect on like what role that's played in my current job, like I did not go to school for what I do. It was more about like critical thinking and learning how to write.
Yeah, I can relate to that. My major is in finances. And then I have a certificate in sustainable development, so nothing to do with what I do.
Quite, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Right.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry for the interruption, but we're kind of doing a whole bunch of things here at the same time.
Don't worry.
Okay. All right. So let's see. I'd like to. I'm sorry about that. I was on mute. I'd like to briefly mention, interrupt for a second. If someone's watching out there and would like to send a question for Liz or for Luis about today's topic, you can do so to our Twitter handle, which is right here, DojoLIVE. Just at DojoLIVE. Send us your questions. We'll read them back to Liz, and she'll respond here in real time live. So that being said, back to you, Luis, and then I'll might be jumping in with a couple of questions that are popping into my head, and a couple of others that I have written down. But anyway, I'd like to. Yours are really much more interesting. So let's go ahead. Go back to you, Luis.
Thanks a lot. Well, I do have some questions of my own, but Claudio wrote a few that he wanted to ask, and I think they are pretty interesting. So one of them. The first one is like you get the chance to grow NetSuite's BDR team, and in there retention is king. By the way, Claudio is a follower of your work, so this might be a little bit more in depth of your work. So he mentions that a lot of it has to do with customer support, and you know, having the right processes and tools make it easy for team to retain customers. So what is the most common problem that you see for other companies, not only NetSuite, you can mention any NetSuite, but for other companies, whenever they start to grow, like is there anything that they should be aware of about customer experience to improve their customer retention, or
okay, wait,
what do you think is the concept?
Just to make sure I'm following, do we want to talk about the talent retention of the BDR team or customer retention, or both?
Yeah, customer retention.
Customer side, yeah. So it was interesting. When I first started working in account management at NetSuite, I was working on a product line called OpenAir that had been acquired, and NetSuite was really just building out that account management function and trying to figure out like what is the right level of interaction, what parts should be automated, what parts need to be in person, what parts could be over the phone, and like how much is proactive versus reactive. I actually just did a talk on this yesterday with a great group that like really spanned a couple of different business models. And I think the key thing is really understanding your segment. So, you know, if you're selling in a transactional space where you can quickly deploy a product and you don't need to educate the end user, customer success and retention looks really different than if you're selling a large enterprise product that takes, you know, months or years to deploy.
All right.
So first, I think understanding who that customer is and what sort of touch points they need. And then in a product-led company, which is I think really like kind of what we wanted to focus on today, I'm seeing this sort of evolution to where we're trying to kind of remove as much kind of human touch from the process and automate as much as we can and let the product do the selling. And that's amazing, but you need to be monitoring and looking for the right triggers. So if you are bringing a customer onto your platform, maybe they go to your website and can sign up with a credit card. Maybe they don't even have to talk to a sales rep. Can you put cues in your product that actually walk them through that onboarding process? Because it's all about that adoption in the first couple of hours, days, weeks. You know, if you think about retention, it's far more about getting the end user to actually start using your product and ingrain it in their day-to-day lives and find value from it early on than, you know, 6 months in saying, okay, we're coming up on a renewal. What can I do today? It's that front end of the process that matters far more than the actual renewal. That makes sense?
It does make sense. I mean, it sparks a lot of more questions, but it does make sense. Yeah, definitely. And well, what do you think? I mean, I think I know the answer already, but what do you think the most important part of the process is?
Most important part of the process?
Yeah, because there's several concepts there that you told us: inbound-led qualification, outbound prospecting. Like, which one of those do you pay more attention on, and why do you think it would be more important?
Okay, wait. No, I'm not sure I'm following. The inbound qualification versus outbound prospecting in regards to what?
To the go-to-market strategy.
Okay.
So let's say I'm a new company and I want to
retention side, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I think, you know, it depends again on the segment you're targeting. You know, there's a number of different sales models out there, and I think if you kind of look at the evolution, there was this huge push towards like the predictable revenue model, right? When Salesforce first put in
errors.
Yeah, exactly. You put a sales team in place and it was, I'm going to do X number of calls and I'm going to reach my target segment and here's the conversion rate, and that worked awesome. And then you saw this rise of like the HubSpot inbound model, and everybody wanted to do content production. And right now I think we're going through another rise where we're seeing a push toward a product-led model, which is how can I create natural gating in my product so that it can sell itself, so that it can create upsell paths, so that it's self-promoting, it's viral, it has a network effect. I don't think that it's one is better than the other. I think it's figuring out what job does your product do, who are you trying to reach, and what are the tactics and channels that actually get you there, and having a really good understanding of how you can incorporate those different go-to-market tactics to actually get to your end user and, to your buyer. You know, you can't just pick one of those. You actually need to understand who you're trying to reach and what is the most effective way to make that happen.
All right. Another question for Claudio, actually, following up on this one. It's he mentioned that he loves your analogy of fix the leaky bucket before putting in more cash.
Yeah.
So once that let's say I'm an entrepreneur and I have a strategy for my product. What is the most common problems that you see for first-time entrepreneurs to make?
Yeah, there's a couple. So the fix the leaky bucket comment came from our 2017 expansion stage benchmark. So we just went out and we surveyed just over 300 companies who are all in a very similar stage of growth. And we were looking at a couple of metrics across all those companies. And one of the things we noticed was that companies were pouring money into sales and marketing and acquisition of new customers, and they were churning them out on the back end. So I think the couple of things that come to mind, first is really understanding your ideal customer profile. So if you can't narrow in and describe in like real serious detail what your target segment is, it's very hard to get a sales team or a marketing team rallied around the idea of how to go get those customers. So I kind of alluded to this earlier, but often what I see is companies don't necessarily understand who their best customers are. So if you look back at the customers you've acquired and you think about what your win rate was, what your cost of acquiring the customer was, what the lifetime value is, what the churn is in those various segments, you're going to find that a couple of them come to the top. Depending on your business, that might be a particular industry. It might be a particular company size. It might have other qualities that are kind of relevant for your business. But getting like hyper focused in just a few will make you way more successful. And then the second thing I find is there's like a little bit of founder magic. So early on, like you can sell to people that maybe aren't your ideal customer profile. And how does that actually scale across a sales organization? So when you go out and you hire your first, second, third sales employee, you're probably spending a lot of time with them. When you hire your like 15th, you aren't. Can you create a message that somebody else can deliver where it doesn't require the founder to get on and really explain it? Is that a scalable message where somebody else can actually make sure that it resonates with your end buyer? Those are kind of the two that stand out to me.
Nice, nice. So just sum it up. Sometimes people would say that they start off a company and they say, oh, my market is everyone.
I can sell to everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, to everyone. Right. And I always mention this to people, like, it's not like Facebook went for everyone at the same time. Like, they were very, very elite, right? You start off with just one university, then more universities and stuff, but that's like the part of growth that we didn't really get to see. Yeah. Right? It wasn't visible for everybody.
Right.
Right. Cool.
Luis, I have a question. Sure. May I step in? Thank you.
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Luis, I know that you probably, today's topic is might be a little bit more relevant to a product-based endeavor or company. And, that's pretty much Luis's expertise in ballpark. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm more into the service part, okay? Because that's what we do. We're business developers in a very niche type of or niche type of segment. We're providing engineering services in a niche market. And in that sense, how would you say that? Would you say that it's a little trickier to find to engage the right people and at the right time with relevant information than it is in a product-based type of strategy? Or what would you recommend, or what tools or strategies would you say that work better for a service-oriented approach rather than a product-oriented approach?
Yeah. So I'm not sure that it's necessarily different. If I think about like the fundamental things that you're doing in that sales process, it does come back first to really understanding who your buyer is. And you said it, it's like the right people at the right time with the right information. So identifying first the target segment, like who are you going after and what does a great customer look like? Again, you can't boil the ocean. So you need to figure out who it is that you're going after. And so in your case with your services, there are probably like a very small subset of companies where it makes a ton of sense and they make a great customer for you. So if you can identify who those are, that's the first step. Then it's who within them. And then the right time, there are triggers for every business. So whether it's a product or it's a service, what is the reason that somebody buys? And can you identify that externally? So I don't know, I'll give you an example. At NetSuite, when we thought about our triggers, there were a few that really stood out. International expansion, rapid hiring, a new CFO joining a company, because we were selling a financial product. And usually those were external signals that it was a really great time to call on a company. And so when I think about selling, whether it's with a product-led approach or in a services industry or with an enterprise sales model, identifying when the right time is actually really important. And it's not always easy to see those from the outside. So I think it's a really good time to engage your sales organization and your marketing team and a cross-functional group to brainstorm and think about what are those triggers for our business, right? Why does somebody suddenly get pushed over the edge and decide it's time to buy? Mm-hmm. I don't think the tactics are necessarily all that different. I think those apply across kind of every segment I've worked with.
I see. Okay, yeah, that certainly makes sense. And okay, let me go back to you, Luis. I think, Luis, would you care to please? I think that Claudio had, as you mentioned, formulated very good questions. So why don't you want to take those, please?
Yes, I have 2 more questions from Claudio. This one is about the sales or marketing strategy.
Yeah.
So they usually companies spend in sales or marketing, and this is critical for companies that are about to take off, right? We're always looking for that exponential growth in a company. And
the curve, right?
Yeah, the curve, right? And you mentioned, well, he mentioned that you talked about underinvesting during this period. So could you give us examples on how as a VP of sales or CEO, can you understand when can you double down on these companies, and what are the indicators that you look for that'll tell you this is a good investment or not?
Yeah, so I think we're getting back to is that benchmarks report that we put out, and really like what we were trying to approach there is what is your sales efficiency? So for every sales and marketing dollar you spend, what do you actually get back?
Right.
And like the goal for a company should be to balance that with the value of the customer long term, right? So there are some companies where you have a toehold, you get a landing in a company, and that expands dramatically over the next 6, 12, 24 months, the value of that customer. There are other companies who have a much more flat model, and understanding kind of what the growth of that customer looks like over time will influence how much you can spend on sales and marketing in the short term. So I think as we think about that, what we're looking for is a company that is thoughtful in how they're spending their sales and marketing dollars. So early on, you can't try everything. You have to make decisions, you have to prioritize. And what we're looking for is for a company and their leadership team to, again, be really thoughtful about who they're going after and what channels will get them there. If you're a really young company, going out and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to have a booth at a giant trade show where you're going to get buried among a whole bunch of other vendors probably doesn't make a ton of sense, right? Are there better ways that you could spend those dollars? Would they be better allocated to, something more traditional, a billboard, a radio ad, or to spending money on actually hosting user groups in much smaller, intimate settings? There are so many different things you can do, but how do you actually balance the cost of acquisition and reaching those actual people with the longer term value of your customer? That's what we're thinking about and what we're looking for. Hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. It does. I do have another question. It relates to that, and this is my personal question. I'm interested in your role as well inside this busy firm. And so as VP of GoToMarket, are you involved or at any stage of making the decision in which company to invest or not?
Yeah, so it's actually very interesting. I don't sit on our investment committee, but I join all the meetings. So what that means is I don't have a counted vote, but I participate in all of it. And so often there's sort of two ways I play a role in that investment process. One is like our team is a differentiator when we're actually doing a deal. So money is money. We can issue a term sheet. It's going to look the same as the term sheet for the guy sitting next to us. The two things on the table are like the valuation of the company and ownership within it, and then how we actually will partner with that company. So sometimes that comes down to the relationship of the partner that will sit on the board. Sometimes that comes down to a technical or product founder that wants support and go to market, where the fact that we can help them recruit, that we can help them define those customer profiles, or we can actually help test their calling scripts, that's really compelling. So there's a sales aspect to what I do. And then the second is actually more around like team and process evaluation. So meeting with their current team, understanding what their go-to-market strategies are, what they've tried, what's failed, how they're iterating and learning from it, the vision for what's coming next. So there's kind of like two ways to get involved, and they look a little bit different.
So you do get, to meet these companies before even making a decision.
Yeah, right? And I see all the presentations. So when a CEO comes in, like I'll meet every company before we make an investment. I'll see the presentations as the CEOs and leadership team present to our investment committee. And certainly get exposure to the businesses long before they're part of the portfolio.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I froze, I guess.
That's all right. We got you back.
As a follow-up for that, what do you consider most in your decision? What the team has done or the potential in that team?
Oh, and when we're making an investment?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. I mean, obviously what they've done is important, right? It's what gets them on our radar to begin with when you're seeing the growth numbers and the acceleration in their revenue.
Right.
But, you know, I think vision is probably one of the bigger things we think about. I can keep doing what I'm doing, but it's how do we reach that next growth curve, right? How do we accelerate the growth we have? Is it extending the market? Is it trying a new channel? Is it you know, a much broader vision for other products that will come into play? We're looking for a founder who has the interest and vision to build a large, enduring company, not somebody that's looking for a quick exit. Right.
So I guess let's put this imaginary stage, right? So you have two companies. It's the same thing. They do the same thing, but one has had excellent results, and when you analyze their strategies, they've done everything they can, and they have excellent growth numbers. And then the other one is the same product, but their numbers aren't as good. But once you take a look at their strategy, you know there's a lot of areas of opportunities that you can improve. Which one would you go for?
Well, I'm not sure it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
But actually, what you're describing is a really normal investment process. So when we're talking to someone, we're actually analyzing the entire market, right? So we're talking to their competitors and we're understanding what are the differentiators. Sometimes that's unique product differentiation. Sometimes that's how their go-to-market strategy actually works. Sometimes it's related to the vision and reach of the company. You know, the growth and performance of the business is definitely key. We need to see it accelerating and taking off. But yeah, we're often comparing companies side by side like that, and there's a lot of factors that go into the actual decision.
Right. It's not black and white.
It's not, no. And then there's a whole other aspect, which is the actual people, right? We really talked about that. How does a team work together? What does a leadership team look like? Are they experienced? All of that matters.
Yeah, it's nice to know that, you know, it's not just about numbers. You also see it with the people, right? The team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we make sure we want to meet everybody face to face. We want to see them in their own environment. We want our entire partnership to meet them. It's not just one conversation.
Nice. Nice.
Liz,
no, go ahead, Carlos.
Sorry, Liz. No, I was just going to, I was just curious. If I were to ask you, Liz, let's think in terms of the three gotta-haves, for example, to attract venture capital investors. Which one would these be?
3. All right.
Yeah, I mean, call 2, 3. You know.
I'm trying to think about what are the number one things. So I think one, we're definitely looking at the size of the market. So you know, what is the potential total addressable market for the product today, and with the vision the founder has. What is the growth and penetration of that business and the ability to go take that market? And it relates to the growth rate of the past and kind of what they're predicting in the future too, right? What do they think they're going to be able to do? And then the team. The team is really important. And it's not just the CEO, it's the leadership team they've surrounded themselves with, their ability to make independent decisions, to hire great people, to attract talent. That's all really important.
All right, there you go. Thank you so much, Liz. Luis, back to you.
Hey. All right, so I have one last question from Claudio.
Sure.
And this is not very much about the business side, but it's more about the human side.
Okay.
It's about diversity. Diversity, you know, it's a very important topic in tech industry. Well, in every industry, I think it should be a very important topic. And he knows that you, OpenView wrote a diversity guide. So he wanted us for you to share with us, how do you see it evolving, and suggest some ways that we as entrepreneurs or other people as executives from their company, how can they promote diversity on their hiring process?
Yeah, so we're in the process of writing an ebook about this. So we're releasing a couple articles at a time right now, and we've put a few out there. So one around attracting diverse candidates and one around removing bias from the process.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've sort of pointed our initial work in this area around gender diversity. And look, I think there's there is a much bigger conversation to be had and broader types of diversity to address, but we're trying to kind of tackle one at a time and think about how we can use the tactics of one to kind of broaden this across a much bigger conversation. But for us, as we think about diversity, I think the biggest impact we see is top down. So are you setting the tone from the top that diversity is important to you and that you're creating an inclusive culture and encouraging it? So I think a huge part of this is just talking about it, making it a focal point and making it important to the hiring managers within your organization, and making sure that people have goals around it, that you're measuring your success, and that you're actually bringing diverse candidates into your funnel. There was a really interesting study done that if you were conducting on-site interviews and there was only one woman in the process among a group of men, there was a 0% chance that person got hired.
All right.
That's pretty crazy, right? So when people say like, well, we had 4 people on site and one of them was a woman, 25% of them were women. That doesn't solve the problem. And so we need to be thinking longer term about how we develop talent, how we prepare women to take these roles, how we grow talent internally, and how we continue to encourage diversity coming in through the top of the funnel. So for us, it's a huge focal point. We've recently partnered with a group called the Athena Alliance, who focuses on preparing women to take board seats. So taking very senior executive women and getting them sort of just over that like initial hurdle into their first board seat, whether that's a private or public board. We're actually doing a launch party in November in Boston with them, opening their East Coast headquarters. And it's all, like I said, the tone from the top. If you have a board that has no diversity within it, what message does that send to your executive team, to your frontline hiring managers? It needs to come top down, and it needs to be something that's important to everyone at the organization.
Yeah, you're right. That does make sense. Yeah, we as a company are doing a lot of efforts in that matter. And I don't know if this would be too personal, but do you have any experience on your end getting to the role of VP? Like, what was it as a woman? Was it hard? Did you face any obstacles or?
Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky. I think I found a number of mentors at NetSuite and externally who were huge advocates for me. And actually, ironically, most of them were men. So I think people talk about women finding female mentors. That was less important to me than finding people who were supportive of what I wanted to accomplish and helpful in kind of being a sounding board and helping me get there. Sure, I mean, like certainly, like there were times that were difficult along the way, but overall, I think it's far more about the individual being able to like face that culture and move through it. And now, like I spend a lot of time trying to think about how I can actually pay that back, and if there are women, whether internally or externally or within our portfolio, that I can kind of play that same role for and help mentor to take on sort of take some risks and take on bigger roles and kind of grow their own experience.
Right. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
Carlos, I don't know if you have any other questions or from the audience or anything.
No, not really. Well, there are no, like right now, and there are no questions coming from the audience. I'm sure they're going to come. There are going to be more as once we share the recorded interview.
Yeah. But
for now, there are really no questions coming from the audience, so we're going to keep an eye on that. So the only thing left for me to do, Liz, if I may, is simply, well, we're about to reach the final minutes of today's interview. So do you have any final words of wisdom for our audience, either current or future one?
Wisdom?
Yes.
God, I mean, I feel like I should come up with something great here. But I think, just given what we talked about, we sort of touched on a lot of different topics, and ironically, I think where we landed here was kind of further away from the topic that we laid out. But it's really around focus, and I think each of the things we hit on today, whether it's identifying what your target segment is, narrowing in on the right channels and tactics to use, or even putting a focus around diversity, right? Calling those things top of mind, measuring them, and continuing to align your team around a core set of goals, I think is really important to the growth of a business.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Liz. So, Luis, anything else from you?
No, not really. I don't have any more questions or nothing to add to what Liz added. Just hoping to stay in touch, Liz.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely. So, Liz, thank you so much for having me here with us today. And the only thing left for me to do is just send you a big, warm, heartfelt thank you. And let's stay in touch, as Luis said. And you folks out there, just remember, keep an eye on DojoLIVE next week for especially our travel edition. So just keep an eye on that. Remember, it's dojo.nearsoft.com. And with that being said, thank you again, and we look forward to sharing with you next week another great interview in DojoLIVE. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.